Project 10, new terms, tonal range. Info panel is something that you will find inside Photoshop itself. The color sampler tool and setting probes, that's also a tool in the Photoshop toolbox. And then levels adjustments, I'll show you how to make those today. You'll need to know all those things for Project 10. So we need to start out with tonal range. What the heck is that? Go ahead and launch Chrome and search. And actually, it might help if you search Photoshop tonal range and see if you can come up with a definition. What are we talking about when we're talking about Photoshop tonal range? When you find a definition that seems like it makes sense for talking about images, do one more search and search a second source to confirm, and then write a definition of your own in your notes. Sense? The range of, you could say tones, because it doesn't have to be a color image. You can have, in fact, the image we'll work with today is black and white. So the range of tones, or the range of light areas and dark areas within an image. The lightest and the darkest, and whatever that range is in between the two of them. Okay, so if we look up here at my example that I have hidden behind our new terms for today. If you had to describe what that image is missing, what would you say that image is missing in terms of the tones of the image?
Well, it looks like it's like washed out, so it's dark.
Good. Yes, it looks like it's washed out. So it's missing the shadows part. It doesn't have any deep dark values. So would you say it has a wide tonal range or a somewhat limited tonal range? It would have a pretty limited tonal range. Okay, so to further explore this and how we use Photoshop to help improve images like this, let's go back into Photoshop. So click back over into Photoshop, and under the menu bar you have help on the far right end, right? So when we click on that, the blue section of Photoshop help, this search will only allow you to search things within the menu bar, anything you can find there. We're going to move on down beyond that to the Photoshop Online Help. So this is still under Help, but it's the first thing below that search pill field. And you should get to a page in Chrome that looks like this. So this is a page that Photoshop, the people at Adobe put together for Photoshop. There are two places I could conceivably do some searching. One of them is right here in the black bar. I also have this other part over here where it says Adobe Community Help Search. What do you think this would be taking me to if I searched a term here? So it takes you into a forum where they actually, Adobe pays people to monitor these things and also then connect similar question threads to try to give people help. But it's an online forum that allows you to get some help. If we use this search bar, this is going to take us to some pre-established pages that Adobe has set up for very common topics. So we're going to use the black bar search up top. And we're going to search, you should get a search field like this, viewing histograms. So you're going to learn what a histogram is about in a minute and how that relates to tonal range. So search viewing histogram. And the very first link you get when you do that, you should have a thing that says view histograms and pixel values in Photoshop. Go ahead and follow that first link. And then read the first two paragraphs that you've got. After the first two paragraphs, you should see some examples. These are images of Notre Dame, the cathedral in Paris. Read the first two paragraphs, look at the examples, and then read how they are labeled, A, B, and C. So A, B, and C here up front are three images, and they have a histogram inlaid in the bottom section of each one. So any kind of a gram is some kind of a graph or chart that gives you information about something, right? So if we look at this histogram and this image, what is this histogram telling you about its image that it's on top of? Is this image kind of washed out like the first example I showed you? So what is this image missing? What are the three areas of the image that the second paragraph talked about? The darkest areas of the image are called shadows, right? The medium parts of the image, the medium tones are called midtones. And what are the brightest parts of an image? Highlights. Okay, shadows, midtones, highlights. For image A, the black areas indicate that there are pixels of these values present. You see this absence? This is the darkest end of the histogram. So the whole very deep shadows, almost until you get to the midtones, there are no values here. We've got midtones and highlights. Let's go to the other example. C, what's missing on the right end of the histogram? Highlights. Right, there are no bright white parts. Those have dropped out of this one. There's plenty of shadows in midtone. If we look at B, the histogram of B, this actually is like a pixel count. So the higher the spike in the histogram, the more pixels, say this is 50% black, that has the most pixels in this whole image, which Photoshop breaks down pixel by pixel, has the highest number of pixels that are at like about 50 or 49% black. It has highlights and it has shadows, not as many as it has midtones. So I need you to add this to your notes. A complete tonal range includes shadows, midtones, and you fill in the blank, highlights, right? So here's the cool thing. Photoshop is really, really good at math. When Photoshop interprets this chain link image, and you can flip back over to your chain link image, it remembers this image pixel by pixel, and it remembers the mathematical value of every pixel. Okay, let's go in Photoshop. File open. You guys all have access to this overexposed image in the Project 10 folder. So navigate to your GD1 resources, into the Project 10 folder. And it's called Demo Project 10 Over. All right, now let's go window histogram. So you can see the histogram for this image. All right, let's drag that to the side. I'm going to pull it over here. And then let's go window, and we're going to pull up a panel called Info to find out information about your image. And this is where it's all like mathematical information about your image. If it just popped up, look up here, click on the tab and drag it so that it stays up. Drag it off of where it's docked. Now let's go to your panel options in the upper right corner of the info panel. And right now, is your first color readout set to grayscale? If it isn't, please change your first color readout to grayscale. Frequently you guys have the first one at grayscale and the second one might be on CMYK. Change them both to be grayscale, okay? And then say okay. So now you'll notice as you move your cursor over your image and you're looking at your info panel readouts, are you seeing percentages? Move your mouse over your image. We want to drop a couple of markers because if we can only tell Photoshop this pixel should be our darkest shadow and this pixel should be our lightest highlight, Photoshop can manipulate the mathematical values of all your pixels so that you can expand the tonal range and it will improve your image. Here's how we do this. What I need to do is drop markers. Like if you're out on a boat, you drop a little buoy to mark a spot. It's kind of like what we're doing here. In your tool panel, there's a thing that's grouped in with your eyedropper tool near the top. It's called the color sampler tool. Go ahead and find that and then make that your current tool. It looks like an eyedropper, but it has a little, like a little crosshair thing next to it. And here's what's important to know about this. When I click to drop a marker, this tool is sampling the pixel that is located at the tip of this eyedropper icon, okay? Now, watch me do this first. So I need to go and try to find the darkest pixel, and I'll tell you that there's pretty dark values. I think 51 is the darkest one down at the base. And when I click and drop a probe, it's just like a marker, okay? And then I'm going to try to find a very light pixel. Like I think there's some 2s. Like here's a 2 near the top of the post. Oops. But if you can find a 1, that's the super lightest. And if you wanted to delete, like I did find a 1% at the very top, then I could right click on my 2% and just delete that probe. So everybody get 2 probes, one at your lightest part and one at your darkest part. So then watch first and then you're going to do it. I'm going to take you through a really basic way to fix this image just to get the concept across. But when we actually do this in the project, I'll show you a better, more sophisticated way to do it. If I go Image, Adjustments, Levels, just watch, don't memorize, and please don't do it with me. Watch me. Oh, guess what I have here? I have our friend the histogram. Now, in this, so I have a little histogram. I also have little eyedroppers. And if I hover over the one with the black ink, it says Sample in Image to set the black point with the shadow, right? So if I click this and say, here is my black point, you can see, and instantly it improves the image dramatically. And then I also want to set my white point or the highlight. So I click on this eyedropper and then match it up to that pixel. And then when I say OK, look what happens to my histogram. I now have a complete tonal range. It expanded my tonal range. Okay, so I'm going to undo that. Now you guys can do this with me. Ready? So we're going to go Image, Adjustments, Levels. And you see your friend the little histogram. So I'm going to get the black point dropper. Click on that one first. Match that up with your probe at the deep shadow. And then switch over to the white point. Match that up with your highlight. And then say OK. All right. Now, double check your histogram. Has your histogram improved? Do you now have a complete tonal range? Yeah, it's way better than it used to be, right? Here's the only problem with that. I just permanently changed all of the pixels on this layer, and I don't have an easy way to get back to the way the pixels originally were. Now, has anybody else besides Dan ever tried to do image manipulations to a digital image? And like, have you ever had it happen, Dan, where you manipulate an image and then you kind of do manipulations on top of that, and then sometimes it starts to get kind of mucky, and you don't have any recourse sometimes except to go back and start over? All right. So here's what we're going to do instead of this, and you can just watch. The instructions are in your project to actually do this. So rather than permanently change everything, you got the idea by what we just practiced. We're going to create what's called an adjustment layer. So, and what I want you to do is keep an eye on what's going on here in my layers panel. Let me move this over here. So you guys don't have this stuff. You guys just have this layer that's the image. So if I go Layer, New Adjustment Layer for levels, instead of just permanently adjusting all the levels like we did before, notice that it creates a new layer here in my image. And this little thing isn't actually a crown. It's alluding to a histogram. Okay, look up here. So when it did that, it opened this Properties panel. And guess what the Properties panel has? The histogram and the 2 little ink droppers, right? So now from this point, I can go, that's the black point, that goes there. That's the white point, that goes there. And then if I looked at my histogram, it's expanded, okay? But here's the thing. Here's how you can go back. If I wanted to totally take those adjustments off, I could just hide that layer and it would go back. It can still remember where all the pixels started at. Okay? So having this adjustment layer really helps you get a much better final result. The other thing I'm going to show you about this, you also have slider bars here in your Properties histogram. You can even tweak kind of like your midtones if you would like them a little bit darker, or if you want your midtones a little bit lighter. just for personal preference. So there's a reference to tweaking the image with the slider bars, and that's talking about those guys there. Okay?